Good afternoon and welcome to the Thursday, January 21st meeting of the Transportation Advisory Committee. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Sechelt and Squamish Nations. We have an agenda in front of us, and I would, does anybody have any changes, suggested changes or amendments to the agenda? Seeing nobody sticking their hand up, and please today, if you can use the hand up function in Zoom, it will help a lot because I've got two screens full of people and I can't see if you're waving. So can I see a motion to, well, okay, in this case you can wave. Can I see a motion to approve the agenda? I see it moved and seconded. All in favor? Yay, all right, we have an agenda. Awesome. Next, could I see a motion to receive all the reports and communications? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Great, we're off to a good start. Okay, next up, we have a delegation with a presentation. It is the Highway 101 corridor review, and who is kicking this off?
I guess it'll be myself, Ken Curry with Parsons on behalf of the Ministry of Transportation.
Great.
So what I'll do is I'll share my screen here. Does everyone see that?
Looks good.
Okay, I will fire it up to do that. So I'm just going to give you a summary of the study that was done last year for Highway 101 from Sechelt to Gibsons. I'll go through the high-level points of what we did and the findings that we came from this study, and then we'll have a bit of time for some questions afterwards. Okay, so the agenda, let's see if I can get this going here. Okay, so the agenda I had is just kind of I'll touch on the objectives that we had for the study. I'll just summarize the problem definition. A few of you have seen this before, so I'll just be brief on those. I'll talk about the improvement options we considered for the study. I'll go through the evaluation results and findings, and we'll talk a little bit about the potential implementation time frame, and that leaves us some time for some questions at the end. Study objectives quite extensive here, but the first thing was to assess the existing corridor conditions in terms of from mobility, safety, geometry, structures, drainage, utilities, and environmental. We're looking at the future corridor performance as well, and considering future growth plans, potential changes to the ferry scheduling, seasonal traffic patterns. We're then taking that information and developing a problem definition that characterizes the existing and future conditions of the highway and the needs assessment that may go through this study area. Then we would generate some options from those kind of gaps or needs assessment that we've done to look at what sort of improvements we could look into the corridor, and looking at those from both a short, medium, and long-term horizon. And then we kind of come up with some recommendations for an implementation strategy. And then one of the key objectives of the study was to make sure that we were, engaging our process with the local municipalities, the First Nations, and other key stakeholders. So, we have had meetings throughout the course of the study with the municipalities, the regional district, and the two First Nations potentially affected by the study area. The problem definition summary, I'll just kind of go through some key points here. So this is the study area that we looked at. So it stretches from Langdale Ferry and included through the corridor through Gibsons, all the way out through Sechelt and out to Red Roofs Road. And we, as you see here, we color-coded the segments. So we looked at each of these segments a little bit more detailed, given the kind of adjacent land uses or the cross section in the highway itself. So we look at the different characteristics a little bit separately. For our initial analysis methodology, we looked at the highway operations, so more from a capacity analysis standpoint. So looking at, does the two-lane section work through the corridor? And that was mostly focused on the two-lane segment between Veterans Road and to Field Road. We looked at intersection operations, so the signalized intersections, and we looked again at that from a capacity analysis standpoint, because those would dictate the capacity of the corridor. And we looked at 11 intersections through Gibson's and Seashell. And then we did a safety analysis of the corridor. There we looked at the historical collision analysis. So we looked at it from a corridor segments and at key intersections along the corridor. And then we did a high-level review of the active transportation and transit on the corridor through some site visits and information that we collected from the stakeholders. From the highway operations standpoint, we looked at the existing level of service, and this is really focused again, as I mentioned, on the segment from Field Road to Roberts Creek Road, and out to Field Road and Veterans Road. And from this initial assessment that we did, we looked at the volume on the highway, and we looked at the passing opportunities. And the passing opportunities is really when we talk about the percent time spent following. It's really a key indicator of the two-lane rural segment. What we found with respect to volumes, the volumes are probably about the 700 to 800 vehicles per hour, even into the future. And so not that the volumes aren't really dictating the capacity or an issue for the roads, the two-lane facility, but it is the long stretches of two-lane road with limited passing opportunities. So when we did the first bit of analysis, we found for the existing segment or existing current year, we found that the level of service was D, and this is based on a range of A to F, with E and F being kind of poor levels of service, and D being the kind of upper levels of acceptable levels of service. So this is kind of industry standard analysis from a traffic engineering perspective. And then the one section that you see there that I just want to point out in the southbound segment between Field Road and Roberts Creek Road, we see that the corridor is actually moving quite well, doing quite well, because it does have an existing passing lane in that segment. But the current year, the highway is running at acceptable conditions. But when we forecasted into the future, and we went to 2035, so we forecast about 15 years out to the future, we can see that those segments that without the passing lane are definitely breaking down, and we get into that level of service E and F in many of those segments, both in the summer and in the fall. And so those were definitely were kind of flagged, and those were kind of moved into some issues that we would have some poor levels of service on the rural segment of the corridor. The segment that does have the southbound passing lane, that segment even into 2035 was working quite well with levels of service of C during the summer and B and C during the fall. In terms of intersection operations, we analyzed all the intersections, the signalized intersections along the corridor. And again, we're kind of using a kind of a capacity analysis with the level of service being a range between A to F, with E and F being kind of unacceptable operations. We're getting high delays on one or more movements at the intersection, where level service of A to D is, with D being kind of upper limits of acceptable operations. And so here you can see that when we looked at all these intersection operations out there for the existing conditions and future conditions, that the intersections did operate quite well overall, but we did see that in the fall, that out at Wharf Avenue, Dolphin Street, that we did see that a couple of movements, the westbound left turn, did fall into that kind of unacceptable level of service EF. There. So that was another area that was flagged from a traffic operations standpoint. Then we moved on to the traffic safety collision analysis. So we looked at 10 years of data along the corridor. So we had over 600 records that we studied, and through that we looked at the kind of the location of those collisions, and we looked at the severity of those, and we looked at the types of those collisions. And some of the key things that we found from that was, we did have quite a high proportion of injury collisions compared to the overall total, and we did have 7 fatalities in that. So the severity was actually quite high. And then one of the surprising kind of findings that we wouldn't really see typically on a rural segments of highways is the high rear end accidents. So when we look at collision types, we see that the rear ends were the highest type of accidents recorded on the corridor. That's usually associated, when we think of congestion, we see on a lot of urban roads. But we think, through the analysis that we did and where those rear ends are happening, it has a lot to do with a lot of the intersections where there's no turning lanes, some of the unsignalized intersections, and people are not seeing a car stop ahead and that might be turning off the highway and waiting for a gap in the opposing traffic flow and being rear-ended. So that's we have kind of concluded, given the location of a lot of those rear-end type collisions. So again, that flagged quite a few locations along the corridor where we needed to look at some safety improvements. So this map here kind of shows all the different safety and performance deficiencies along the corridor, and the bulk of them are safety orientated, with there's that one intersection being a performance or capacity analysis issue, and the 3 segments in the rural area where we had level of service issues into the future, into the 2035 timeframe. So improvement options to look at what kind of things we can do to improve the safety and highway performance, intersection performance along the corridor. We looked at, some of the places for the highway performance. We looked at passing lanes. So we looked at a couple of segments of passing lanes in the rural area. And then we looked at the intersection performance, mostly focused at the Wharf Avenue, Dolphin Street intersection, looking at some increased capacity for the westbound left turn. And then for safety, we looked at quite a few different types of improvements, ranging from new left turn lanes, acceleration, deceleration lanes, through to even installing some traffic signals. So when we get specifically where we looked at these things for the passing lanes, we looked at these in the rural section between Gibsons and Seasouth. And here we looked at 3 passing lane improvement options were developed to kind of complement the segment, the southbound segment that already has a passing lane. Intersection improvements, again, we looked at a number of different intersection improvements involving some additional left turn lanes at the unsignalized intersections, improving pavement markings and interchange configurations. And then, overall, we looked at about 8 independent major intersection improvements, and also looking at the cross-section and multiple intersection improvements in the Davis Bay segment. And I'll get into a bit more detail about those. And then one thing that we did look at for kind of the long term is we still did look at a short bypass of the Gibsons area, just around the more urban area, to kind of deal with some of the intersections as an alternate to trying to improve the intersections along the highway through Gibsons. And one of the points that I'll bring up, and I do have a couple of slides, is on the active transportation side and transit-related things, that we've made notes in the report that, for any of these locations, especially, say, the passing lanes, that active transportation improvements would be incorporated into those projects once they move forward to design and implementation at a later date, and that that could be improving shoulder widths along the corridor, or improving crosswalks and things like that. Just to kind of quickly go through the passing lanes. So this kind of gives us an idea of where some of the passing lanes are being considered. So this is the southbound passing lane that's being considered, the additional one between Veterans Road and Roberts Creek Road. And so this is about a 1,200 meter passing lane that we think we could install between about Leak Road and Highland Road. And this we looked at this location from the least amount of conflicts with accesses and driveways and municipal roads tying into the highway. So kind of the least conflicted point along the corridor to provide a widened section to get that passing lane in. In the northbound section between Veterans Road and Roberts Creek Road, we looked at this passing lane area, and this is about a 1,600 meter one between Leak Road and Maskell Road. And then the third one that we looked at was about 1,800 meters long between Pell Road and Jack Road in the northbound direction. So those are the 3 options that we looked at for passing lanes in the rural section. And then when we look at intersection improvements, we looked at Joe Road and Orange Road. So here, looking at the safety issues here, we felt that it was necessary to look at adding a northbound and a southbound left turn lane. So we have the opposite left turn lanes in there. And then just improving the overall intersection geometry. It's a little bit on a skew angle. So definitely the key feature there is adding the northbound and southbound left turn lanes to the intersection. Similarly, around Flume Road, we would look at adding a southbound left turn at Locklear Road and a northbound left turn at Marlene Road. And then because those two intersections are a little bit offset, we would then have a painted median between the two intersections to cover that opposing left turns that we provided those two roads. The intersection improvements at Lower Road and Highland Road, here again, we would be looking at adding a southbound left turn. And we thought at this location, given the tight geometry, that we'd be looking at as well as the southbound right turn lane would be a suggested improvement for this intersection, as well as improving the overall geometry, given the kind of secondary intersection at Pine Street and Lower Road. At Tita Way, we identified some safety issues there, and here we felt that at the T intersection that modifying the signal phasing might be a safety improvement to be looked at, and this might be looking at the type of accidents or collisions that occurred, is putting a left turn protected only phase in instead of a protected permitted phase. And then at Wharf Avenue, this is where we had the capacity issue that we identified in the future. And this is where we would look at allowing dual left turns in the westbound direction so we would look at a little bit of reconfiguration so that we'd have one westbound left turn lane and one shared westbound left through lane. And that would mean that we would have to make some minor modifications on Wharf Avenue to receive those two left turn lanes coming from Dolphin Street. And that would give us an opportunity when we do get those improvements or make the receiving the lane, so we have two lanes going westbound on Wharf. That would mean that the angled parking that's there now, we would look at changing that to parallel parking, and then it would give us an opportunity to improve the active transportation facilities in there, i.e. improving the sidewalk for pedestrians that would be adjacent to the parallel parking. Other intersection improvements would be at Shorncliffe Avenue. So here we would look at kind of tightening up the intersection a little bit, creating a better channelization there to slow down the speeds of the right turn movements and improving the crosswalks, definitely reducing the distances on the crosswalks to reduce exposure, and then potentially even adding in a traffic signal or a pedestrian crossing signal eventually at this intersection. And then at Hill Road, to improve the very skewed intersection at Hill Road, we were looking at possibly closing Hill Road and looking at alternate access to Hill Road by extending Dale Road to a perpendicular tie-in to Highway 101 with left turn bays there. And finally, similarly to Hill Road, to try and address the skew at the skew angle at Red Roofs Road at Highway 101, we'd look at a slight realignment of that connection just so we can get it to be more of a right angle and improve the visibility and sight angles onto Highway 101. And then in the intersection improvements, like when we get to the Davis Bay area, we have quite a few safety improvements and other improvements that we have suggested or recommended. So here we'd be looking at new traffic signals at Davis Bay Road with pedestrian crosswalk, and then new left turn lanes at a number of locations, Mission Road, Selma Park Road, and then some restrictions to turning movements at Whitaker, Wesley, and Havies Road. And we'd look at closing the north intersection at Monkey Tree Lane. So with all these changes, when we look at the left turn lanes and the number of intersections here, this is where we also propose to look at modifying the cross section through this whole area. So we would look at having almost a continuous left turn lane along the corridor, through lane in each direction. And then we would look at adding 2-meter shoulders to the corridor for cycling. And then we'd also look at a 2-meter sidewalk on the east side as well. So we definitely a big improvement to the overall cross section to this area, given the number of left turn lanes that we were considering at the number of intersections along this location. And in this one here, we broke the corridor, this part of the corridor, into 3 segments, between Field Road and Whitaker Road, and kind of prioritized those segments. So between Field Road, Whitaker to Havies Road, and to Havies Road to Monkey Tree Lane. And then that allowed us to kind of identify potential priorities within that overall Davis Bay area. So this gives us a quick summary of the location of the various improvement recommendations that we considered, and so where the passing lanes are located, where the intersection improvements are being located. And then here, because we think the bypass is definitely a long-term potential improvement, we just showed it here as the 3 possible alignments that we examined. And here, we looked at a Reed Road alignment, an alignment that kind of cut between Cemetery Road and Reed Road at the back of the properties, and then one that kind of paralleled the Hydro right-of-way, all tying into Payne Road with an alternate access onto Highway 101. So those 3 options were assessed at a high level, and then kind of left at that stage for further study. So the evaluation results, I'll quickly go through these just to kind of put some findings to some of those options that we talked about. So the passing lanes, all 3 of the passing lanes, and we assessed these and we put the traffic volumes onto those and did some analysis. We found that all 3 passing lanes, those lengths that we put in place and the locations, all achieved acceptable level of service for Highway 101 through that whole area. So in both the northbound and southbound directions in 2035, that we can get the highway back to acceptable levels of service and reduce delay for vehicles being stuck behind slower vehicles driving on that segment of the highway. When we talked about the intersections, we found that we were getting fairly moderate low safety improvements. So most of these intersections are being looked at from a safety perspective. And so at Joe Road, Orange Road is one that, by just looking at adding left turn lanes at the intersection, we can potentially reduce up almost 1 collision a year on average. So this is kind of statistical analysis, but this is the kind of improvements that we would be anticipating. At FLUME Road, we can be looking at up to 1.1 collision reductions per year, and then we get down to a little bit lower at only about half a collision per year at Lower Road, Highland Road, and then the Titaway intersection, we look at some fairly small improvements at that one with the change in the signal phasing, and then definitely we would get the Wharf Road and Dolphin Road back to acceptable levels of service by 2035 if we put that extra left turn lane in place at that intersection. At Shorncliffe Road, we'd see some modest safety improvements at that location as well, with the reductions in the right turn and improvements in channelization. Again, modest improvements at Hill Road and Red Roofs Road with the realignments. And then when we look at the Davis Bay area, we felt that when we looked at all the intersections and all the improvements together, given the number of collisions that we recorded over the last 10 years, we could see that we could be getting close to almost, on average, 7 collisions being reduced per year in that segment with those types of changes in the geometry. So that kind of gives a kind of a recap or a summary of all the types of improvements and the anticipated benefits from those. And then on the active transportation side, we when we did a kind of site reconnaissance out and we got feedback from the stakeholders, we noticed that there's a lot of gaps in the active transportation facilities out there on the corridor today, both in terms of sidewalks and cycle lanes in the urban areas. There's definitely a lot of substandard shoulders compared to current standards for the a typical highway such as Highway 101. So we did a lot of narrow shoulders in the rural areas, so not quite meeting what we'd like to see for cycling and walking. And then there's a lot of informal facilities or limited space at several transit stops along the corridor, so that those would likely need to be updated as projects came into play. So some of the targeted improvements that we have identified and I spoke to are the ones at Shorncliffe Avenue, where we have looked at putting in traffic islands to reduce the crossing distances and possibly installing pedestrian signals. And in the Davis Bay area, where we're definitely looking to improve the overall cross section through there and adding shoulder cycle lanes and a sidewalk. And then other improvements where we would see improved pedestrian facilities or active transportation facilities would be associated with the Wharf Avenue, Dolphin Street intersection improvements. Definitely with the passing lanes in the rural segments where we have over 4.6 kilometers of modified or modifications of the cross section where we would definitely widen the shoulders as part of that work. And then there'd also be shoulder widening at the other intersections that are being improved that we talked about earlier. So potential implementation timeline. So we kind of looked at the safety, the other improvements or benefits that could be achieved through these projects, and so we kind of prioritize things and put these recommendations back to the ministry. And so for short-term projects, things that probably 1 to 5 years or 1 to 10 years, we'd be looking at the intersection safety improvements at Joe Road, Orange Road as being a priority, and Shorncliffe Road, and along with Lower Road, Highland Road intersection, and then Tuta Way as probably being our higher priority safety improvements. And then we look at what we call adaptive signal control. So this is where the traffic signals are responding dynamically to demand, especially as we relate to ferry traffic surges. So we would suggest that the ministry looking at this adaptive signal control being installed at a number of intersections in and around Gibson's. And that's just to deal with the ferry traffic surges where we get a high amount of demand in a very short amount of period. And this was reflected from feedback that we got from Gibson's. Our analysis, when we look at the intersection operations over the hour, they seem to be working not too bad. But if you look at the intersection operations, probably a half-hour stage where the ferry traffic is about 20 minutes long, they're actually operating quite poorly. So adaptive signal control would help normalize and increase the green time and make the intersections operate a little bit better for those ferry surges. And then the other short-term project that we think should move forward quite quickly is the passing lane in the northbound direction between Veterans Road and Roberts Creek Road. In medium-term projects, we would get the other passing lanes, the other intersection improvements at Wharf and at FLUME Road and Gibson area intersections. And then we would start looking at some of the Davis Bay segment, some highway widening and intersection improvements there, with looking at possibly doing segment 2 first and then segments 1 and 3 later. And then beyond that, when we look beyond 2035, if there are any other intersections that haven't been able to be completed due to budget issues or things like that, those would be put on the high priority list. And then the short bypass would be something to be looked at in the long term beyond 2035. So I think that brings the last of the presentation, and I'll open it up for questions. And I'll leave it on the screen right now.
Actually, if you could stop sharing, then it's a little easier to manage. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to take shameless advantage of my position as chair to say that in the objectives of the study that was, I think, in one of the first slides, there seems to be a lot of objectives around safety that were not addressed. And certainly the concerns that I hear from the community around safety tend to focus on two areas. One of them is the condition of the highway. For instance, the collapsing culvert over Chester Creek Ravine, and the fact that the highway already floods at Davis Bay and has to be closed when we have a storm surge coming in the winter. So there are a lot of questions about the condition of the road, which are not addressed in the report, which seems to be mainly about the capacity for vehicles traveling between Gibsons and Sechelt. And then I notice that all of the active transportation actions in the report are driven by motor vehicle priorities. So the motor vehicle, once again, gets #1 attention, and the active transportation is, added on as motor vehicle safety is addressed. And finally, this doesn't really address the issues around pedestrian safety and bicycle safety on the Sunshine Coast right now. We have many, many issues. They come up again and again. And so I'm a little concerned about the definition of safety that was made in this report, and who set the parameters for what was covered.
It's Ken here again. So the parameters, we're the consultants. So the ministry asked us to do the study, and the parameters were set as a part of the overall terms of reference for this study. And definitely, it does have a focus on mobility and safety. And I think to go back to kind of comments like when we do the safety analysis. We're looking at data. So a lot of the information that we're always working with is we've got the traffic data and volumes. We have the safety data that we get from either a couple sources, such as the ministry's database, the collision database that's recorded from a police forms, or sometimes we have access to claims data from ICBC. So when we mine through that data, these are the types of incidents that we will see. And if we don't see recorded pedestrian incidents, then those won't show up in the information, so we can't really address things. So when we met with the stakeholders, yes, we heard about a few things along the corridor, but we don't have any data. So for some of those things, such as like Shorncliffe and other locations, we are basing some of these improvements on primarily feedback that we did get from stakeholders, but without other evidence along the corridor of incidents involving pedestrians, we don't have the data to support doing some modifications to the corridor. We do realize that lots of areas we have gaps in the active transportation facilities, and those are being identified, and we have identified some projects, but it's difficult for the ministry to go in and add widening of the shoulders for a small amount of width, from 1 meter to 2 meters, if it's not associated with another project. So we've done as much as we could to identify things where we can piggyback projects and look at improving active transportation, knowing that there's these gaps out there. So, but going back to some of the main objectives of the study, active transportation was definitely in there, but it's definitely, we're looking at the corridor overall from an operations performance, and then the conditions of things that you mentioned, that we weren't really looking at the pavement conditions. We were looking at the corridor more from a standpoint of operations and performance.
And this is Elena Farmer. I'm the district manager with the ministry. And so just to add on to what Ken was saying, the objectives of the study was to look at capacity in order you know, we're looking at our capacity when it comes to the various development that is occurring on the Sunshine Coast, and to see what these types of studies are used to help us in the planning as we work with the municipalities with the various developments. So that's one like aspect of it, is why the focus is more capacity based. When it comes to the condition of the highway, that is something, you know, that is done outside of these types of studies. We do condition assessments like of our pavements in order to determine when the rehab is going to take place. So that is something that, you know, I can take back, and I can work with Michael Braun and Colin Midgley, who are the local area manager and operations manager, to speak with our rehab program manager to understand the conditions and the timing to get those types of improvements to be done. With the Davis Bay flooding, you know, we are aware of that as being an issue. And again, it would be something that would be done outside of this type of study. But I would like to say, you know, from, you know, active transportation, we did have the announcement of the stimulus program that is currently underway. And there has been monies that have been earmarked for the Sunshine Coast to continue with some of the shoulder widening in Davis Bay. And that specifically is going to get started probably late February, early March to complete some works there. And there's also some active transportation work that's going to take place in the Gibson area.
Thank you. I'm going to stop pontificating and go to the list of people who have put up their hands. So I'll start with Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, thank you for that overview. And I applaud all the things that are happening. I think it's great. And it's nice to see some improvements coming. I do have a comment around active transportation and the data-driven approach that seems to be a little bit of a problem for me, because when I talk to people as to why they're not biking on the Sunshine Coast, is because they're terrified. And you're not going to get any data about people bicycling because people are terrified to go bicycling. And then the same thing goes for pedestrians along the highway. People are not going to cross the highway because they're terrified of it. And so everybody hops back in their car, and that's where you get your data finally. But ultimately, I think I look at the proposed improvements along Davis Bay, and yet I feel like a more holistic view should be taken, because yes, it is almost at sea level. Sea level is going up. We have one bridge going over Chapman Creek, and if that gets taken out, that means the South Coast has no access to the hospital, and the North Coast has no access to the ferry. So, is there a more holistic view of what is going to happen to Davis Bay before we throw millions of dollars at improving a road that may need to get bypassed in the medium to long term?
I would say that, like, I hear your concerns, and you know, I've taken note of them, and it's something that we'll definitely take back to. When it comes to a bypass, there was an announcement made in September when the report was released. That there was to be improvements at the Joe Orange Road intersection, as well as initiating a study to look at an alternate route, so a bypass. So not just a bypass of Gibson's, but like a true bypass, and doing public engagement on that. So that is something that we are having some discussions on internally. We do have a new minister, and so we are just working through those briefings, and we hope to be able to reach out and have some more fulsome conversations on that work and what it may look like.
Thank you. Anything else from Modi? Okay, next I have Alan Williams.
Hey all, thanks so much for that. It's interesting to see it all starting to come together. There's definitely lots of good stuff in there, but from, not to belabor this, but from an active transportation point of view, this, especially given that it's forecasted out to 2035, it's kind of disappointing. As Donna mentioned, the study is just sort of scoped on flow and safety and doesn't really address active transportation outside of other related improvements. And so we understand that, the primary role of the highway is to connect communities, and from an active transportation perspective, it doesn't seem like that was really assessed. The performance of it as a way of getting people in cars from one place to the next was assessed, but if there was if the road stopped and cars couldn't drive past, nobody would consider it to be functioning. And so I guess I have two questions. One is, does this represent the only planning Modi's doing related to active transportation infrastructure, or is there other planning that we're unaware of? So that's the first question. And the second one is, generally speaking, it seems like active transportation improvements sort of come as a big surprise to us on the Sunshine Coast, if they do and when they come. And that the same thing appears to be true for all sorts of other changes that are implemented on the Sunshine Coast. So I'm wondering if there's ways that we can improve the feedback loop for what's planned on the Sunshine Coast, what's going to happen, so that we can potentially bring these things for public feedback or at very least input from the Transportation Advisory Committee that we're sitting on here. Thanks.
So this is Elena Farmer again. So I apologize for the lack of communication that you're expressing with the types of work that the ministry is doing on the Sunshine Coast, and that's something that I'll definitely take back, and we will work to have better communication, with the municipalities and the regional district, to make sure you're aware of the type of activities that we're working on. And then I guess in regards to an active transportation study, at this time, we do not have another study taking place for the Sunshine Coast for active transportation, but it is something that we can take back, and we do have an active transportation department that we can speak with to maybe get back to you on what we might be able to work towards for active transportation.
Okay, thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. We're hoping that you guys are going to be coming and presenting at the District to Seashell, so I'm not going to try and spend too much time asking Seashell related questions, but looking at Selma Park Road to Snodgrass specifically, I have some concerns around the profiles that are being suggested and the amount of road space and width that's there to operate and work in, given how steep some of the driveways and the hills are there. But I'm looking forward to seeing more about that in the future. And then sort of my question is there any opportunity to reprioritize projects? The District of Seashell's about to start work on Wharf Avenue upgrades. It's going to include sidewalks, parallel parking, general improvements. There'd be a lot of synergy for Modi to come to the table to commit to some of the highways related work at the same time.
So this is Elena again. So yes, I did receive a letter requesting for a presentation to the District of Sechelt. So, I will be getting in touch to formalize a date for that. In regards to, I think, the grades and whatnot, this is kind of like the first stage. There's no like true designs that come out of this type of work. It's really more what is possibilities and lines on maps, more so than really fleshing out the details for those types of design. And as those projects are programmed, that's when that type of work would take place to make sure that those types of concerns would be addressed and what exactly can be done. In regards to the timeline and the prioritization of projects, there's definitely an opportunity to have those shifted around. This is a study that really takes a look at it from a technical perspective, and technically, what the numbers are telling us is needed at certain times. So the next stage is really to now have these conversations, speaking, with the regional district and the municipalities to find out what their priorities are. And also if there are opportunities to do work in conjunction and, moving things up, like there's always is that possibility. And that's kind of where we hope that we can move along now that we have this work done that kind of tells us some of the priorities that need to be taking place, so we can work with you guys in order to program them.
It's Michael Braun here as well. Just to add to that is we also work with with developers as well. And if there's an opportunity for us to achieve any of these goals through the development process, we look at that as well.
Thank you. Mayor Seegers.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on Director Toth's comment about Wharf and Dolphin. We have reached out to the Ministry of Transport and requested that they work with us on this area. We have 100% funding. We are going forward with that project this coming year. It would be a shame if what we put in, you would have to come and rip up in another couple of years to put in your infrastructure that you need. We are at the 90% design stage, I believe, at this point. So if you were to come forward and indicate you'd like to work with us, we're open to that. So our engineering department is waiting to hear from you. The other piece I'd like to just express my displeasure with is the timeline. You're talking about short-term and medium-term timelines on this. You're saying short-term is 1 to 5 years and medium-term is beyond that. So we're looking at minimum of 5 years out to get some of the critical pieces, the critical infrastructure pieces that we know are failing to start being addressed. So I think we as a Sunshine Coast team are going to need to do some advocacy, and I'm sure you're going to be hearing from us quite a bit in the short term, medium term, and long term. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in. Well, actually, I see Director Hiltz, so I'll let you go first.
Thanks, Chair. If you could comment about the active transportation stimulus money and in rural areas opposed to municipalities, as it seems to be focused on municipality areas, so the access that regional districts, rural areas have to that funding source.
So there is an active transportation grant program that the ministry takes applications in every year, and there is an opportunity for, I think it goes for a maximum funding of $500,000 to support active transportation. So there is that. The stimulus funding, the projects at this point in time, and actually I might ask Michael to jump in because he's definitely a lot more familiar with the specifics of the projects.
For ones that receive the grant funding?
No, the ones that we have through the stimulus program.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was just jotting down a note when you were when you're asking there. Yeah, so a couple of stimulus projects that we're looking to complete by the end of March. The first one is in Gibson's, where we recently completed some pavement rehabilitation works, and we saw that as an opportunity, you know, working with the town of Gibson's and also through Alan's group as well. The request to add cycling lanes on the North Road portion of Highway 101. I'm hoping to see a draft of that design tomorrow. So, and again, that the designers are looking to align that with our active transportation design guidelines as well, trying to fit within those guidelines. Yeah, so looking to complete that in March, which involves mostly line marking. So hopefully the weather will cooperate in March so we can get those down. And then the second one, we've got, again, just continuing on some of the work we've done over recent years to improve the space on the highway shoulders. I know from the cycling community that, you know, separated cycling facilities on the highway is more desirable, but we've tried to balance that with the availability of resources and trying to make those improvements as we can. So we're focusing mostly on the area around the Davis Bay Hill. To go back to, I can't recall who was talking about the steep driveways and stuff, but we'll be working with our local maintenance contractor to make some improvements along there for cycling. And then a couple of spots where there are some narrow gaps between Gibson's and Seashelt as well.
Thank you. I see we have a question from Staff Sergeant Hallam.
Hi, sorry, I had a question. I was paying attention, but the fatals and some of the person's injuries, did you guys have data around our one passing lane that we have? Because I know that since I've been here, and it's only been 2.5 years, we've had one fatality there, and we've responded to several serious accidents in the passing lanes. Just curious if in the beginning, did it show where the most, like the highest risk areas for persons injuries and fatals were, like in this study?
We definitely have the locations for all the accidents that have occurred on the corridor and where the fatalities have. If there is information on, you know, whether it was a pedestrian involved incident, we would have that information. The analysis that we did, I think we had up to 2017 data, so we might not have caught things this the last year or two, but we could definitely go back and look at some of those collisions that might have happened around the southbound passing lane and see what has happened there and whether we should be, you know, highlighting things further. But off the top of my head, you know, I don't recall any significant amount of incidents occurring at the end of the passing lane for sure. You know, a lot of the incidents that get recorded on the police reports get associated with an intersection, so we have to, you know, kind of go through some of the information to kind of disseminate whether that is actually associated with the intersection or if it's someplace, you know, slightly off to that. So we did notice that there was some that in the rural section that got associated with some intersections that we couldn't, you know, really understand why, because there's very low volume roads. So we saw that we thought that they were probably associated with other components, but definitely it's something that if you would like, we can go in and just pull out some of that data and show, provide some graphs and information of what we do have in that area of where the incidents occurred and what the critical rates are in that area.
Well, and yeah, I arrived in September of 2018, and I know of the fatals that we've had since then. So that's pre 2017. I just curious because I do know that our passing lane in that area is a rally race. People are just trying to get by, and I know one definitely appears to be speed. We have some speed issues with people just trying to get through, and as from the police's perspective, it's hard to get through, and you can't get to calls for service because of the congestion, and people are doing high risk behavior to get past people. And I just wondered if what kind of data there was around the passing lanes, and the concerns around that for what that will look like.
Well, definitely with the information we have, and I can touch base with Gabriel, and we can pull a bit more data of what's in the last few years, and we can just look at that segment where the passing lane is, and and have another quick look at that, especially if there's been some more severe incidents in the last couple of years. So I don't mind pulling that together and having a look at that with Gabriel and Elena.
Yeah, there's definitely, we've definitely had fatals between Seashell and Gibson through Roberts Creek in those areas. Like that's where the last 3 fatalities that I'm aware of occurred.
Thank you. I'm aware that our time is moving on here. I just wanted to add that hearing that the study of the bypass would be, put forward to after 2035. The bypass has been studied something like 5 times now, and putting it forward another 15 years is not necessarily helpful. In the meantime, Reed Road has become the bypass, whether we like it or not. The road is narrow, it has no paved shoulders, it's very dangerous, the traffic is very heavy, and it needs to be addressed sooner, not later. Particularly, of course, I guess that's the north side of the road, because it belongs to Modi. And I will add on the question of passing lanes that putting in a passing lane that ends at Lower Road would exacerbate a very dangerous situation that already exists. We've had 2 pedestrian fatalities in my area, in between Poplar's Trailer Park and Wood Creek Park. And to put in a passing lane that ends right there would just increase the traffic speed going into that already extremely dangerous area. We have a major barrier to transit use on the Sunshine Coast is the fact that you can't get across the highway to and from the bus stop safely. And that creates really, really serious problems for us. So unless anybody has further questions or comments on the corridor study, I see Diana Mumford.
Thank you. A couple of questions. One has, I did not find any survey of the lighting issues that happen on the Coast Highway. And when we're talking about active transportation, we should also be talking about pedestrians. It's not just cycling, it is pedestrians. And for ferries and our issues there, it's people trying to get, as Donna has said, try to get to a bus and get to the ferry. And so if the lighting is really poor and the pedestrian access is also challenging, then we're again putting people into cars and using the ferry parking lot, which is another issue that we deal with. So is lighting not considered in any of this?
So as part of this study, lighting would not have been considered, as it is more looking at capacity. But it is something we do consider, and with some of the improvements that were identified with the intersections, like they generally would come with improved lighting at those intersections. In general, though, the ministry, we do not light our highways except at major intersections. So it generally is limited to that, but it would be something that would be considered as part of any of the intersection improvements that take place.
So bus stops that are maybe mid between intersections then would not receive any lighting.
Not necessarily a bus stop, but you know, it's something that we can have further conversations about. But no, we did not. This study did not specifically look at lighting, and those types of details generally do get fleshed out as you move towards those works.
Yeah, because the pedestrians, they're not wanting to travel on the side of the highway with no shoulder and no lighting and facing traffic. So that's all, it all adds up. It's safety, but not the capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Seegers.
Thank you. I know you want to wrap this, so I'd just like to make a request that prior to Ministry of Transport coming to present at the District of Sechelt, they sort out their video issues so that we can actually see their faces. And I'd also like to request that Michael Braun put in his calendar when our transportation meetings are. We would really like regular updates, and we would like you to come to our meetings, and we can make sure that the dates come to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will add that, yes, more communication is needed. Seeing the improvements to the pavement on Marine Drive near Langdale, it's nice. I mean, it's nice that work got done, but the first we knew about it was a sign going up saying road work. So it would be really valuable to have some communication with Modi on a regular basis. We have asked for it repeatedly. Councillor Crowell.
Just thank you, Chair. And just very quickly on that subject, and again with resurfacing, we had resurfacing work done in on North Road and Gibson's Way, and there was very short notice. There was a bit of a community backlash because it happened at night, and a lot of people, didn't have any warning that there were going to be, the noise, the lights, and one thing and another. So communication is important. If you're going to be working in the communities, it's nice to know it's happening so we can at least give people a heads up.
Yeah, no, I've heard loud and clear that we definitely need to improve our communications, and we will do so.
Thank you. I hope we can have a meeting with Moti and the rural directors too, because we have a lot of issues other than the highway in the rural areas with our road network. So thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the Sunshine Coast Transit Future Plan. Mr. Walton, did you have anything that you wanted to say about that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So back in 2014, the Transit Future Plan for the Sunshine Coast was adopted. That plan is a service-specific strategic plan guiding service levels, routes, and infrastructure expansion of the custom and conventional transit service here on the Sunshine Coast. At the October 10th, 2019 meeting, the board adopted the following recommendations related to future service levels for the transit system on the Sunshine Coast. That staff work with BC Transit to research options and resources required to implement service expansion in 2021, 2022, and report back to the board in Q1 of 2020. And that staff work with BC Transit to develop a project plan to update the Transit Future Plan to guide future expansion decisions. The purpose of this report was to seek board approval for the terms of reference for a Transit Future Action Plan on the Sunshine Coast. At that meeting, the board asked us to go back to BC Transit with the terms of reference that were presented to possibly amend the document to include a revised engagement timeline for public engagement and stakeholder engagement, to explain incomplete and outstanding items from the 2014 plan, just to more inquire about who the stakeholders would be, and just more on bus shelters and amenities. And at this time, staff are happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. I'm guessing you're going to report in Q1 2021.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. No time machine involved. Do we have questions, comments, inquiries? Okay, well, we're looking forward to the Q1 report, and I'm working with the Seniors Planning Table Transportation Committee too. They've had some good thoughts about, particularly about our paratransit situation here on the coast and how we might improve it. So I entirely failed to remember to look at the minutes. So we have minutes from our previous Transportation Committee meeting. Are there any corrections, business arising or anything else? Or would somebody like to move acceptance of the minutes? I see a motion, I see seconded. All in favor? Okay, thanks very much. Sorry about that. My mind was on intersections. BC Ferries, travel statistics. It's been an interesting year. Diana Mumford.
Oh, yes. So let's just go through the sheet that I had first. I provided information about the restart funding. And as you have been able to see, the contract that was signed by the provincial and federal governments with BC Ferries did not provide any support for the capital funding piece. So I know the question is, when will the Langdale redevelopment or improvements, or even at Horseshoe Bay, start? That all we have been hearing to this point is it's been put back 5 years. So it's on hold, and unless the conditions at BC Ferries improve fairly dramatically, fairly quickly, there's no sight of that happening. The next one was the feedback for the new website, and I'm sure most of you have tried that website and found some of it fairly frustrating. So BC Ferries did do a look at what people were using, what they were saying in the feedback section. And so they are making some changes, hopefully before the summer when people are using the ferries more. But if you do have continuing comments and frustrations about the website, please use the feedback comment section that is available on the site, because that is what they're looking at. And our Ferry Advisory Committee also continues, and all the Ferry Advisory Committees are continuing to provide examples of frustration in some of the areas, and BC Ferries is continuing to look at changes. The last piece on that sheet was the project working group. That was a group of volunteers on the community, from the community, that were working with BC Ferries and looking at areas to improve our service, but with the caveat that it was not to require capital investment, that it was within BC Ferries control, so only under their control. And there were a number of solutions proposed or ideas given, and now the project working group, BC Ferries, actually is going to the internally first, looking at options that can be done, and then there will be more community comments. So it's still a work in progress. And finally, the statistics, as you can see, it has been significantly depressed, particularly over the last couple of months. And the one missing, which is December, would be the one that would be most showing the decrease in numbers of ferry traffic being used. And that data is not yet available. I looked just before the meeting started and it still wasn't up, so I can't provide that. So at the next meeting, I'll be able to show that. But in my own personal watching of the ferries and any traveling, the numbers are way down again because people are staying home, which is good, but it's not doing much for BC Ferries' bottom line. So I will keep up this if people are finding this this data sheet of any use at all, then I will continue to provide it so that you can see it month to month and compare it also to the system as a whole, because our Route 3 is actually doing better than a good number of other routes. And I think that's all I've got unless there's questions.
Thank you very much. I have one suggestion for BC Ferries. I wish their gift shops would go online, because I miss shopping at the gift shop on the Queen of Surrey. They have great clothes, but I'm not traveling anymore, right? Like everybody else.
Okay.
Mayor Seegers.
Thank you, Diana. What I'm noticing on the ferry's website, I can't find a search function.
There is no search function there. Last, or when we had a conversation with them about it, they said it was difficult to find and nobody was using it, so they canceled it. But maybe, and we sort of said, but if they can't find it, how can they use it? So their reasoning sometimes makes it a challenge. But I have found personally, if you go to the bottom of their website and you go to the site plan, that seems to be one of the best ways to find things.
Okay, thank you.
Good to know. Thank you. Okay, next up on our agenda is transportation related items from the Q4 report. That shows, the impact of COVID on our transit system as well. Any comments, Mr. Walton?
I'll just go over the stats quickly. Thank you, Chair. So transit operated at 80% of its regularly scheduled service hours through the winter due to COVID, of course. The average monthly ridership for conventional buses throughout the winter was of 30,000 trips, which represents a 32% decrease of the average monthly ridership from the same period in 2019. As well, revenue decreased slightly from the winter from the summer, again due to COVID, and 34% decrease from the same reporting period in 2019. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Seegers, your hand is still up, or you?
Sorry, I'll take it down. There's so many people over there, I can't see that it's up.
It's a little challenging. Okay, I am not seeing questions. Not that it wasn't interesting, but I think we're getting towards the end of the day here. Correspondence, the Sunshine Coast Highway Society. Let me just see. Is there anything that we've got 3 items of correspondence, but I'll start with the first one. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. The letter from Robin Marriott, which is in this agenda, came to our reading file at the Gibsons Council, and it's from the Sunshine Coast Highway Society. I think everyone here appreciates the sentiment contained in the letter, and we're also aware of the reality we're dealing with respect to Moti and a new highway. The feeling was that if anything is going to be advocated as suggested in this letter, that it be done as Team Sunshine Coast.
Good point. Mayor Seegers.
This came to council on Wednesday night, and we have sent a letter previously, and it was put forward that we send a letter again in support, given the new representatives in the provincial government. And wasn't this just on our other agenda this morning too? No, not yet. Sorry, I'm just seeing it everywhere, so I don't know. Okay.
Okay. Next up were 2 items of correspondence that we also moved to the policing committee, which is concerning safety in school zones. Did we have any further discussion around these items? Councillor Kroll, is your hand still up or up again?
Just in follow-up to what I suggested earlier and what Mayor Seegers suggested, would I anticipate that the regional district would sort of join in a joint communication co-signed by Team Sunshine Coast to advocate the contents of the letter from Mr. Marriott?
If we want to do that, we would need to get it onto an agenda. Other than the advisory committee, so that the directors could have that discussion. So,
Can I make a motion in that case that this letter be forwarded to the board?
Okay. Do I see a seconder? I see that seconded. Any further discussion of the motion on the floor? Seeing no excitement out there, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion? That's plenty of hands. Thank you very much. Anyone opposed? Okay. Over to you, Darnelda.
Thank you. We talked about these two letters at our meeting at policing, and there was in the letter, hang on, the second one with regards to road safety, there was a letter back from the province, and they suggested that the Sunshine Coast Regional District advocate for or apply for funding for transportation improvements. I forget where it is in one of these letters. I know we looked at that. And then there was conversation at the previous meeting about the fact that municipalities do stuff around the roads, but is this funding even available to regional districts given they're not responsible for roads? So I think we still have people here from the Ministry of Transport on this meeting. They could perhaps address that.
Is this with reference to active transportation funding?
Yes, page 17.
Yeah, so I do believe that is available to regional districts. Like traditionally, so like our ministry, we're responsible for operation maintenance of the roadways, but there are situations in rural areas where the regional districts will look after other facilities within highway right-of-ways. That could be sidewalks or pathways or things like that as well. So I do believe that program is open for regional districts to make improvements.
Do we have a function under which we can do this? It gets confusing. We have done it with gas tax funding, so presumably we can do this even though we don't have a transportation function.
Yeah, these are usually done through like a permit. Yeah.
Okay.
GM Hall had his hand up.
Ah, sorry, I can't see what's. Go ahead, Scott, please.
Yes, Chair, through function 665, we would, under most circumstances, we have a service available to do this kind of work. That's a separate answer from resourcing. Thanks.
Right, thank you very much. I see Ms. Mumford.
I have extensive experience in the past dealing with traffic for elementary schools, and it's an absolute perennial issue that has gone on forever, I think. And just improving the roads will not decrease the speed of the drivers, which tends to be the biggest issue. And so I think one of the suggestions and one of the things that we have used in the past was to approach ICBC, and they have had programs in the past working with schools and districts to have sort of more of an education process. I know years ago they had signs that you could put up on the side of the road, smaller signs that would attract people's attention to the school zone. I think at one point I had become so frustrated, I was suggesting a city issue submachine gun that you could start shooting at the cars as they go by, because nobody seems to pay any attention to the school zones and their speed. They didn't think that was such a good idea, but you do get to that point when your children are traveling on the roads and people are just completely ignoring any of the students. And often it's parents that have dropped off their kids and they're now speeding out.
Thank you. Sue Gerard.
Hi, thanks. Just to follow up on the previous meeting of policing and public safety, I'm glad that we had the opportunity to address the letter from Cedar Grove PAC and to discuss some of the things that we can do to find a resolution for this parent group and in their desire to raise public awareness and get more visibility about the Chester Speedway that Diana was saying. It's potentially an issue that is ongoing. As I stated at the policing and public safety, I've been dropping and picking kids up at Cedar Grove since 2004. To this day, because that's just the way it worked with the kids in our family. And it has gotten increasingly busy, and it is a thoroughfare. It's used as a thoroughfare, not just by residents, but also by industrial vehicles. And so it is something that is a hot topic. And I know this letter from Tamara Hedden from the Cedar Grove PAC supported with them, that she really and they really wanted to bring this to the attention of the Transportation Advisory Committee. And we did find, we did speak about Speed Watch. We connected with Staff Sergeant Poppy Hallam on ways, and with Louisa from ICBC, who we met today. And so we've made some very valuable connections just today alone. And I know that this is something that will be very well received with the Cedar Grove PAC. And as we continue to work towards finding a way, we discussed active transportation. We talked about how we want our kids to be able to safely get to school. And, the studies that have been done with children in this age group, they're saying they want to be more active, but there is that safety issue. So how can we marry that and bring that all together? Well, it looks like we're heading in a really positive direction. And I'm sure that the PAC really appreciates this being addressed at the transportation meeting, and also the following letter from Mayuki, who I spoke to earlier today. So everything is heading in a very positive direction. So we're with much thanks to the committee. If there's any questions or anything, I know Tamara is sitting in the gallery. We also have Secretary Treasurer Nick Westwick in the gallery today. If there's anything that anybody wants to add to that, that would just be great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I see Alan Williams with your hands up.
So I know that active transportation improvement sponsored by our local governments has kind of been log jammed for a long time related to the gas tax issues. And this comment that local governments apply for funding and that they reach out to the regional district to do something seems like, I don't know what the priorities are, but I feel like the local government should be engaging in applying for this kind of funding for work. So I guess my question to you is there a project? I'm sure there's lots of projects, but is there a project we could move forward to just see how this plays out? And if there was, how would that move forward from here?
Okay, who are we asking?
The Sunshine Coast Regional District.
Does staff have an opinion about this?
Chair, I can offer a few comments. CAO McKinley might have more to add, but the current status of things is that through cooperation with the Ministry of Transportation and other regional districts, a process for licensing work within the right-of-way was completed, I guess, sort of late 2019, I believe. And the piece that remains unclear to us or unanswered is whether, with that license in place, whether gas tax can be used, like whether that constitutes a long enough tenure to permit gas tax to be used, even though the land remains owned by the province, which normally prohibits the use of gas tax. So that question remains unanswered. The other thing that has changed is that through clarifying processes with the Ministry of Transportation, it's now clear what design standards are required for any infrastructure improvements. And so at a minimum, any older projects that were considered and were at some point of the design process would need to be reviewed and likely require a full redesign at this point. And while this change in process and authority has been under consideration, the two services that SCRD has for bike and walk paths, 665 and 667, have both been diminished to just a very limited amount of resourcing for maintenance of the assets that we already have. So currently there's no planning resource associated with that, with those services, nor is there money sitting in an operating budget to do something with right away. Thanks.
Right. Did anyone from Modi have any further intelligence on the situation with right-of-ways?
In terms of what specifically?
There's a I understand there's a memorandum of understanding out there, but it does not seem to have been signed off and implemented.
Okay. I'm somewhat aware of that memorandum of understanding. I apologize. I don't know much more about it, though.
Okay. Yes.
If I can fill in a blank, Chair, that the memorandum of understanding just formalizes the understanding of the process through which a local government, a regional district can license an area of the right of way. And
right, yes, yeah.
Yeah. And well, I also am not entirely sure of the status of signatures. I know that it's in progress, and it has although staff will follow through to get that done, and I know the ministry staff are in agreement with us that they want to get that done. It poses no practical limitation to our ability to move forward or not, because we are clear on the process that has been agreed upon to move forward when we have clarity about how we might fund that work. Thank you.
I believe we are going to be having a discussion about gas tax funding at our upcoming budget process. So perhaps some more clarity about this will be forthcoming at that time. Director Seegers?
Thank you. So when you talk about the fact that the standards or how it has to be designed have changed, are they requesting that we now follow the active transportation design guide that came out? Is that the standard we're looking at? Or is there something in between? Because I notice it's not necessarily applied everywhere evenly.
If I can answer just based on the title, they are guidelines. It's a relatively new document, so I think, you know, as we undertake projects where we're trying to incorporate those elements within those guidelines, we're learning a lot about them, and we're, you know, and where there are constraints, we do try to adapt and come up with engineering solutions if need be as well. So they're there. I think if we were to receive a submission to undertake works within one of our right-of-ways following those like for active transportation, we would refer back to the guidelines, and if for whatever reason those standards and specifications within the guidelines could not be met, it doesn't kill the project. That's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're stuck with many constraints on the Sunshine Code, so.
This also would be a good topic for a discussion with the rural directors. Alan Williams, I see your hand is up.
I was curious about gas tax, but that wasn't really specifically my question. So in the letter that was sent from Modi, it says, in the meantime, the ministry's active transportation program offers grants to local governments to make improvements to their active transportation networks, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I'm curious about is, what are the mechanics? If as a group you decided that you wanted to do some work, what are the mechanics of going about that? Like, what would it take? What thing does somebody have to do to start that process off? Is that directing staff to look at it? Is that forming a group to decide what active transportation projects seem to be the highest priority? Just how would that recommendation move into somebody changing something on the ground?
That's a great question. So perhaps I can take that question to our budget process coming up, because we do have some active transportation projects still on the books, which never got done. They need to be reviewed for a number of reasons, but it's difficult right now because, yes, nobody seems to be clearly in the driver's seat on this. So it's getting fairly late. Oh, there is a question from Poppy Hallam, and I'll ask Modi. It was suggested that we put speed bumps in front of Cedar Grove Elementary on the road there. Is that something that could be done that Modi would consider? Or does Modi not want to do that kind of traffic calming on a road like Chester?
I apologize, Donna. Can you repeat your question?
Could we put, would Modi consider putting traffic calming such as speed bumps across Chester in front of Cedar Grove Elementary?
The ministry doesn't support speed bumps. It is a common request, but they do impede maintenance of the roadway. The policy is we don't do speed bumps on ministry roadways.
Thank you. Alan Williams?
Sorry, my daughter's at UVic taking civil engineering right now, and they're just doing a course on this. And she was telling me that in some places they do kind of like 3-dimensional paintings on the road, which works sort of like a speed bump. But anyway, it was somebody from Modi who was teaching the course. So anyway, I thought I'd bring it up.
Maybe a fake pit or something like that people think they're going to drive into. I like it.
Yeah, the trouble is that it only works the first time.
That's right.
So, I'm going to do, I realize it's running late, but we don't get together often, and we've already committed the time here. So I'm going to do a quick roundtable. I'm going to attempt to do a roundtable because Zoom keeps changing the order that everybody's in on my screen here. So I'm going to,
Chair, respectfully, if anybody who wants to speak raises their hand, it will prioritize them on the screen and they won't move in that order.
oh, that would be awesome. Actually, pretty much everybody who hasn't spoken or hasn't been introduced, stick your hand up and just give us a little update on where things are at. And I will take you in the order that you arrive on my screen. Don't be shy. Director Pratt.
There's the unmute. I was just going to flag for Colin and Michael about setting up a meeting with the rural directors, as I'd sent an email and I just sent a reminder to Michael and I've gotten a reply back. So we'll get something set up for the rural directors to talk about rural issues here coming up. Otherwise, I mean, we have a number of issues that can wait for that meeting in the Half Moon Bay and the other rural areas. So some pretty specific rural stuff going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Darnelda.
You all know about the issues in Davis Bay last week with the highway and how it had to be closed to get cleared up and whatever. So I mentioned that. Another point, we have a new engineer who started with us Monday of this week. And she will be working on, she'll be working on active transportation. And at our meeting last night, we approved a grant application to do some work from the highway up Mason Road, through Ripple Way, etc., to get over to Kinnickinnick School. And we already working on the other side. So there would actually be a complete loop around. For those of you on bikes, you'll have an active transportation route all the way around, starting at the highway, going around and coming back to the highway. It's awesome. So, but that will be something that we'll be working on going forward. They're going to look at updating that active transportation routes and things for the municipality. So we'll make sure they're in touch with TRAC. See what we can make happen.
Thank you very much. Alan, what's up with TRAC?
Trying to find that mute button. We engaged with Donna, and she set up a meeting with her local constituents to look at the active transportation wants and needs, and it seemed like a great process. I don't know if you're planning to talk about that at all today, Donna. If you're not, I will, and if you are, I'll let you go.
Oh, go ahead, Alan.
Anyway, so Donna set up this meeting with their group, with her group, and had people look at what was working well and what wasn't working well, and built a pretty great report out of it. And I wonder a couple things about that. One is it made me realize we don't really have a great story around what our active transportation, what our walking pathways are. And I know the District of Sechelt has put in a grant application for a mapping function on the Sunshine Coast. I just want to make sure that everybody here is aware of that, that if people could get a hold of, I think it's Marina Stepovich, who is a part of it anyway. That's how I heard about it. But I also encourage other directors, and I think Donna, I hope, and we're willing to help, could reach out to their constituents and try and start a discussion like that. So just putting that out there. That's all.
Thank you. Yes, I did a consultation online and, some Zoom meetings, some emails and stuff with people in my area, trying to identify particularly high value, low cost opportunities for better connectivity for active transportation in our area. Let's see, Colin Midgley, you're there. What's new with you, Colin?
Not too much. Ministry's still gearing up for some of the winter maintenance activities that we're doing. We finished the bypass, majority of the bypass repairs last week. We still have a bit more to do on that. Other than that, it's still just trucking along.
Thank you. I see Eric from Capilano Highways. How are you?
Good, thank you. The only thing, just reviewing previous minutes that I didn't notice was I wanted to make sure that everybody has our 1-800 phone number. It is 1-800-665-3135. And that's the public number to be given out to everybody. We haven't had much for winter yet, but looks like there's a half a chance in the next little while here that we could see some. So people are going to want to get a hold of us. We want to make sure that number's out there if we could.
Thank you. Yeah, it has been a mild winter so far. Louisa from ICBC, please say hi.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to introduce myself. Louisa, my last name is Mendonça. The C would be pronounced like an S. That comes up a lot, so I thought I'd throw it out there for you. I'm new to ICBC Road Safety. I'm your Road Safety Coordinator, replacing Harvey Cooner, if any of you have met Harvey and worked with him before. Harvey's moved on to another area closer to his home. So I have taken over here. I'm excited to work with all of you. I do have some work to do here with Cedar Grove Elementary, see what we can do to help them. And I'm excited to work with you. If you have any outreach for road safety, any education pieces or something I can help you with, feel free to reach out to me. We do have an ICBC road safety campaign calendar I can share with you for our campaigns over the year. And if you need anything, please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If ICBC could update the road safety data on the website that is, I think, still stuck around 2017, that would be awesome, because I do refer to it for accidents at intersections and stuff.
Understand that is something that I've heard a lot about. I will pass that on.
Okay. Mr. Hiltz.
Thank you. I wanted to express my appreciations to Cap Highways and Ministry of Transportation on the quick repairs on the bypass. And I did note that they were able to take some, do some street sweeping going downhill on the uphill lane. So they were able to take advantage of the not having traffic on the bypass to do some extra maintenance and street sweeping. And so, yeah, thank you very much for looking after us there.
It was fun walking up and down the bypass when it was just us pedestrians.
Yeah, it's Michael Braun here. I'm going to embarrass Colin and just throw a big shout out to him. He spent many long hours out on the bypass during those 3 days with Tyler Lambert from Cap Highways. So great job to those guys.
Good, thank you. Do we have anyone else? Anyone going once, going twice? How about a motion to adjourn? I see lots of motions to adjourn. All right, I think we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice day. What's left of it.